I'm here today with Jeff Detwiler, who is CEO of all of the Long and Foster companies. And welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, John. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
Excited.
Well. I know. I know we're gonna have some fun. So, Jeff, I guess I'm curious to learn. Tell us a little bit about your career and how did you end up as CEO of Long and Foster companies?
Well, I'll try to make that somewhat quick if I can.
Sure.
It's like so many other things. You kind of fall into it. It just sort of unfolds in front of you. But when I graduated, I went back to the Midwest, and I worked there for 5 years. Ended up taking a job with another bank in the Midwest in Minneapolis. Then went to Wall Street in New York for 5 years. Went out to Southern California for 5 years, and then came here. Wow. And it was just a progression in terms of mostly banking and moving for higher level positions. Sure. And different types of roles in companies. But I share with you where they were is because it's really been interesting. Working on both coasts and the Midwest, and it's amazing. You might as well be in different countries.
Absolutely.
When you do that.
Well, you could go from Northern Virginia to Shenandoah County in Virginia, and
two different countries, right?
Yeah, you don't have to go far to find a whole new world.
Yeah.
So you graduated from Princeton in '83.
Yes.
And then you went out to the Midwest for 5 years.
Correct.
And then when you got to Wall Street, I'm just curious because you see the movies and you see the pressure and all that. I mean, how did you coming from the Midwest to Wall Street? How did that impact you?
Well, so just to set the stage on that a little bit more, is that I had been in the Midwest. I was originally in Michigan, right outside of Detroit. That's where I had gone to high school, and so I kind of went back home. I had some connections there, and I got into the world of banking there. Went to Minneapolis after that. There's a thing called Minnesota Nice.
Yeah.
And I spent 10 years in Minnesota, and there is a Minnesota Nice, I'm telling you. And I left Minnesota and went to Wall Street. The firm I was working with was a very advanced, innovative securities firm. We structured and created mortgage-backed securities. We were the largest mortgage-backed security issuer in the world next to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And we really innovated a lot of the jumbo loan market and a lot of the other loan products that are out there today. But my working sphere were really all the Wall Street firms. So they would underwrite our deals that we would structure. They would sell the deals to investors that we'd structure. So it was one of those situations, and in your career, you sit there and you say, I can do that.
Right.
I think I can do that, what that other person is doing. I think I can do that. And so I said, boy, I think I can do that. And I had the same, Wall Street is a really mysterious, pseudo-glamorous, but kind of scary place from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Right? And I said, I can do this. I want to go there.
Right.
So I went there in 2000 after 15 years of working, but more importantly, after 10 years of being in Minnesota Nice.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as Wall Street Nice.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. There is no Wall Street Nice. So 5 years at Wall Street, it's a highly competitive, it is a political, it is a rough and tough world. Yeah. And the thing that struck me the most after 5 years, why I chose to leave, is that the team concept is really hard to come by. Now, I think some firms are probably really good at teams. Goldman Sachs is a firm that comes to mind, and things like that, of really being good with teams. But I know how it is. It's everyone's there's a dollar there. Right. There's a dollar that's going to be paid out, and you all go get yours. And so it's rough. And it's like, if I can take that dollar away from you, I get it, and you don't get it. But there's not $2 to get. There's $1, and you got to go get it. And so it's really tough, the team environment. And I didn't care for that. And so after 5 years, I chose to go to another part of the country. I just wanted to start something new.
Right. So you went to California from Wall Street. Yeah. So that's a whole different world.
Oh, right? It is a different. It might as well be a different country for sure. Right. The Wall Street thing is that I had I had my fourth child when we were living in New Jersey, and I was working on Wall Street. And so I had 4 young kids at the time. During that point in time, 9/11 occurred. There were 13 parents in my kids' little elementary school that passed away that horrible day.
Yeah.
My neighbor passed away that day.
Wow.
There were, for 2 weeks straight, we went to funerals and wakes. It was a time you never want to revisit by any means. But then also the next thing that happened was the Anthrax Scare, if you remember that.
I do, yeah.
So it emanated from, we actually lived in Princeton, New Jersey, and I commuted to New York every day. And the Anthrax Scare emanated from Nassau Street, which is right downtown Princeton.
Wow.
And so we were all so edgy. It was just such a tough time, and you combine kind of the work environment and not a real great team environment on Wall Street, combine what was happening, personally. It was a lot for my wife and for my family. And so we said after about 5 years, look, we're in a good place. Let's look around and figure out where we want to go. And Southern California showed up on the map for us, and knew some people out there. And we ended up going out there, and it was just, you couldn't have found a more different place to be.
And that's what you needed at the time.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And my wife and kids needed a different place.
Right.
And so it was a great 5 years for us in Southern California.
Yeah.
My family lived there for about 8 years. I spent 3 years commuting back and forth from Northern Virginia to California while I was working here at Long and Foster.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, it was. I thought you were nuts. That was.
I was. I have a record. So my record, like my claim to fame, the Iron Man record is I did 52 Sunday night red eyes in a row.
Oh my gosh, that is unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and you just have to kind of desensitize yourself to it. So during that period of time of commuting, originally you start out, it's maybe like Thursday afternoon you go back and you come back Monday morning.
Yeah.
Well, you give up 3 hours from the West Coast to the East Coast, so then you start leaving Sunday night.
Yeah.
And then things start getting crazy in our industry, and so it ended up I'd go home on Friday afternoons.
Yes.
I'd get to my house at about 8 o'clock California time, which is about 11 o'clock p.m. our time.
Right.
And then have dinner on Sunday and head to the airport and then get back, stop, take a shower in Reston at the town center, and then get into Chantilly for the opening bell on Monday morning.
Yeah, that's a commitment.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So your wife and kids obviously were enjoying living in California, and they obviously, just based on what you've told us, were not ready to move to the East Coast.
Yeah.
They wanted to stay there.
Yeah, I had, my son was, I think when I first came, my son was a senior in high school, and so we didn't want to move for that.
Makes sense.
And then I had my next oldest is a daughter, and she was an athlete, and she was, she would have had 3. She had her sophomore, junior, senior year, and I didn't want to leave till after that.
Makes perfect sense.
But our family story that my wife seems to deny is that my daughter was going into her senior year. She was a basketball star at the high school and played other sports. And so the last thing they wanted to do is see her leave.
Right.
And my wife came to me and she said, you know what, we're all ready to come to Northern Virginia and let's get back together. I said, I can't believe that Jacqueline really wants to leave before her senior year. Oh, yeah, she's fine with that. Well, come to find out after I read my daughter's first essay at Langley High School about how her heart felt like it got ripped out when I moved her from Southern California to Northern Virginia her senior year. So there was a little disclosure issue between my wife and I at that point in time.
I see that. Yeah, that goes back to Stephen Covey's rule number 5 or habit number 5 that I preach every day in my organization, which is seek first to understand.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to jot that down on my list of good things to know.
Yeah, seek first to understand and then be understood. Yeah,
without a doubt.
Yeah, you learned that.
So anyways, nonetheless, she did a great job her senior year here.
Wonderful.
I had 2 younger kids that came and we're in middle school and elementary school, and so they adjusted and things like that. But it is interesting, you're on the different coasts and in the middle of the country, and all I know is you can take the kid out of California, but you can't take California out of the kid.
And that's a good thing, I think.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Yeah,
So,
there's a little more of a laid back attitude. We were talking before we turned on the microphones about my two kids, and I have
Right.
one kid with a California personality, and I have another kid with a New York personality.
Yeah.
So I've got it all
Yeah.
under one roof. But
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said with take life as it is.
It is. It's an outdoor life. It's a really active life. It's more chill
Yeah.
than it is kind of tense.
Yeah.
And they continue to be that way. They're very committed to their work now, their careers and things like that. But all but one of them want to get back to California in some way, shape, or form.
Right. That's one of them is back in California. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your kids for
Yeah,
a second.
okay,
So
great.
while we're on that, so you've got so all your kids went to college.
3 of them went to college.
And then
one of them did not.
And then they're back at home with you.
Yeah. So
how did that happen?
Combination between just kind of moving back home to get started in your career and, being ready to move out then.
Right.
And this whole COVID thing hit and everybody just locked down. And so all 4 of our kids were at our home. And I will tell you, I know a lot of people have had such a horrible time in 2020, working through COVID and all the issues and things like that. And I'll tell you, I'm sensitive to everybody's personal situation. People have lost people, and I feel for them. But personally, it may end up being one of the best personal years in my life because
Right.
it was an opportunity for the 6 of us to spend a lot of time together. Everybody's doing constructive stuff, work-wise, working from home, but we had each other, and that was it. So, and what I know, all of them were adults, right? And so, with 6 people, there's always enough for a party anytime.
That is absolutely true. I think a lot of people share your sentiment. I mean, I spend most of my days on, video meetings with homeowners who want to either build a new house or buy a house, and many of them have kids. They have families and they don't have enough space in their home, and they're all appreciating the change in our culture and the time that they have at the dinner table at night and the time they have together. And I feel the same way. So it's really been a good thing.
Yeah,
so
it's good.
That's fantastic. So your one daughter is back in California.
Yep, my youngest is back in California. She's going to San Diego State University. She's a sophomore there.
Wonderful.
Loves it. She's taking all her classes virtual. She said, "Dad, I do have this one class that I can't take online. I have to take it in person." And I was like, "Well, hooray, we're finally getting, our money's worth. You get to go into class." I said, "Tell me about this class." She goes, "It's surfing." And I said, "Do I pay the same money for a credit hour of surfing as I do for economics?" And she said yes.
Yeah, that's the way
but
it
she's
works.
back and she's loving it. And
Awesome. So what's your favorite part about being a father? You obviously love it. You love fatherhood.
Yeah, I'm a better father of older children than I am of younger children.
Yeah.
My wife is certainly the superstar there with younger children. I think just the ability to engage people that you really care about to an nth degree. I mean, I think the love that one has for their kids can surpass anything.
Right.
It's like no judgment, no anything. You'll do anything for them, and so I love the idea of seeing them kind of really develop and blossom and unfold, and I can actually help them out more now. They ask questions. I don't push anything on them. I allow them to come to me if they choose to, and to ask career questions and work-related questions and life questions. And so we just have great conversations, and we always have a lot of fun. There's a lot of teasing that goes on in my family, and so we have
I
a lot
could
of fun
totally
with that.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think all families with big personalities have some internal competition of teasing is how it a lot of times.
Yeah, show your love through teasing. If they're not teasing you, they don't care about you. Right?
Exactly. All right, that's fantastic. We're going to take a quick break, Jeff, and when we come back, I want to hear about when you first decided that you wanted to be a CEO, or if it just kind of fell in your lap.
All right,
we'll be right back.
Yeah.
In case you missed it, here is a clip from episode 3 with Boomer Foster, president of Long & Foster Real Estate.
Leadership is about doing, not saying, because you get a lot of vocal people who profess to be leaders, and they'll say one thing, but when you watch them perform, they'll do something completely different.
Right.
And I think you've got to have a consistency. Like, I want to lead by example. If I don't want to ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So if we're talking about managers or regional managers, and you're talking about making contacts and recruiting and building relationships, I don't have legitimacy if I'm sitting in the ivory tower and saying, you guys need to be doing this, if all I'm doing is sitting in the ivory tower and not out doing that myself. So leadership by example is something that I learned in football, because I was very vocal when I first got to college, and by the time at the end, it wasn't about do as I do. It wasn't about do as I say.
All right, so we're back with Jeff Detwiler, CEO of Long & Foster Companies. Jeff, thanks again for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah,
and it's been great, John. We had a great time before the show, and now we're rolling.
Yeah, well, I was actually getting a little nervous because we were covering so much ground before we had the microphones on. You're like, okay, well, we got to run out of stuff here. So tell me about becoming a CEO at Long & Foster Companies. Did you want to be a CEO? Was that your goal? Or did that just kind of fall into your lap?
Yeah, no, it really wasn't. It unfolded in front of me like so much has. I think I would go back to when I was in Minneapolis and I was working for a company called RFC, which was the big bond firm. We created securities and things like that. I was probably, effectively the number 2 person there, and it was great. And we grew the company. I think I was the 200th employee, and it was a little company when I started, and we grew it up, and we did great things. It was really exciting. But I was always number 2, and I had my boss, the CEO, was a great guy, Bruce Paradis, great guy, one of the favorite people I've ever worked for. And but you're always number 2, and so there are decisions, that are made that, number 1 makes and number 2 listens.
Right.
And then I went to California, and I worked for Countrywide, which was then bought by Bank of America during the financial crisis. And we had about 7 different companies there. And the one company I worked for, I was number 2.
Right.
And as my boss there, another great guy, Doug Jones, told me, he said, look, we're partners in this thing, but I've got 51% voting rights, and you have 49%. So that basically means number 1 gets the call and number 2 listens on those calls. And when I was on Wall Street, in between Minneapolis and Countrywide, I was in that role also, kind of behind the guy running the department and things like that. So it was just this feeling like I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to be, and I mean that in a non-gender specific sense.
Sure.
I wanted to be the one who had the 51% voting share. I wanted to be the one who was ultimately responsible for success or failure, and you really can't go look anywhere else. And so I found that opportunity at Long & Foster. So it wasn't originally there. I originally came and I was the president and the COO of Long & Foster Companies, and that's when Wess Foster was still here. And I worked for Wess, and Wess had a lot more than 51% voting share. but we had a really good relationship. We had a lot of fun times together. There were a lot of stressful times together. But once the acquisition occurred, I did really become the COO. I was in that what I'll call the top spot. For the entire time that I've been here. And you learn a lot of things when you're in that top spot.
Yeah. So what is it, because I'm very, very happy. We talked about before the show. I like being in number 2 position.
Yeah.
I think I spent most of my life wanting what you wanted was I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to be the one making all the decisions. But now the closer I get to that, I realize, you know what? It's the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Sometimes it's blue over there. Yeah. So when you were the number 2 guy compared to being the number 1 guy, how different is that from a workload perspective? Obviously you love the satisfaction of being the CEO. But is the workload that much different, or is it about the same? You have more decisions to make in a day?
I think it's, here's one of the things, you talk about the closer you get to it, the less you want it,
exactly.
The more you learn about it.
Yeah.
And this is what I've learned about being the guy, and that's kind of being number 1, the guy, right? What I learned is you're really hardly ever the guy. Yeah. You always work for somebody, and every time you get to a spot that it looks like from the outside that you're going to be the one, you're not.
Yeah.
And then you get to the next spot, and you're still not the one. And I had this conversation with somebody here at Long and Foster just last week, and a friend of mine, and talking about this concept, and I just said to him, you're just hardly ever the one.
Right.
So we're always working for somebody, and even in big public companies, CEOs, are working for their board of directors, and the board of directors are working for shareholders, and so it just is. That's what I've learned.
Yeah.
But the big difference is, I think, between being sort of in that 51% voting share versus the 49%, is that. Work never quits, right? You never go away because the buck stops with you.
Right.
And so you're 24/7, 52 weeks a year, and that's how it is. Now, fortunately for me, I grew up in my career in a fixed income environment, meaning I was a trader on Wall Street. I was a bond trader when I worked at RFC for 10 years. We had a big trading desk where we bought and sold securities. And so your bond position that you own never goes on vacation. It never never has a weekend, and it never goes home at night, and it never goes on vacation. So you sort of, I learned to live with the fact that even when you're off, you're never off.
You're always plugged in.
You're always plugged in. You have to be. And so it hasn't been nearly as difficult for me. But I think that's what, it gets exhausting at times, just constantly being kind of connected and plugged in. But it's not only me. Our whole team here at Long and Foster is extraordinary in that. But that's probably my biggest concern about any executive position, is just constantly being plugged in and not being able to unplug and recharge.
It's a lot easier to be plugged in 24/7 when everything's going right.
That it is.
That Saturday afternoon when you check your email and there's no fires in the box,
it's good.
Yeah. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
Yeah. So we obviously had a few of those days last year.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
March 17th and August 23rd.
Yeah. It was a really interesting thing, the whole COVID transition. I mean, it was we went to work, Nick, our engineer here, and I've been working together pretty much constantly, remotely, and doing these shows, and we came to work on a Thursday, and we said, this is our last time we're going to see each other, and we're going to go into lockdown. And Friday, this was really just a little bit before the whole area shut down. We were a day or two ahead of the curve. And it really was quite dramatic,
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine. I got a small team, 10, 12 people. If you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and now all of a sudden you're all working remotely, I know the pain we went through. So
yeah. Well, there's a lot of consternation, right? I just remember our team sitting around a table. And if you remember back then, John, is that there wasn't a lot of guidance. It was surprising.
There was
for as
none.
big of a deal. There was little federal guidance.
Right.
Everybody started looking to the states. Obviously, we operate all across a number of states, and there's all kinds of different stories coming out of each state. And so, but there wasn't a lot of guidance anywhere. And I remember us sitting around the table and finally saying, look, this is the right thing for our agents, for our employees, and for our customers. We got to shut down. And I think it was probably 10 days to 2 weeks ahead of anybody else. And it was a scary decision that we made. And I remember we made the decision, we adjourned, we were walking out, and I just looked at Boomer and I said, I wonder when we'll sell another piece of real estate.
Yeah. little did you know.
Oh boy, surprise, surprise. But there were some scary times in April, without a doubt.
Well, what was weird is that it was eerily quiet. I mean, there were no phone calls. There was nothing to do. And our team, we grabbed onto this podcast project and we really all sank our teeth into it. And it really kept us sane. But there was no traffic, no emails, no phone calls. Any outreach we did was met with radio silence. And then it was just like all of a sudden we get a phone call. We get a second phone call. People start returning our emails. And then the floodgates opened. And I think everybody started to realize, I think there's two things we didn't know. We didn't really know how infectious this disease was.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew.
No, not at all.
And so we were wiping down our Amazon boxes and our groceries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the groceries were coming, delivery, if you could get them delivered. We were putting on rubber gloves and masks and wiping everything down, the bags with the alcohol and all this stuff. And that's what they were telling us to do on the news.
Right.
And then
you wouldn't touch a doorknob, right?
Exactly.
You would Lysol your doorknobs, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. And now I think we know it's not coming into your house on a Amazon box or or any box or your groceries, right? So we can let our guard down a little. But I think the other thing that we didn't know was how long is it going to last? And now everybody is working and living and schooling and exercising from home. And everybody needs a bigger house. Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. And I think it all started to dawn on people at about the same time. And I think we're still in the middle of it. Yeah. Here a year later, we're just past the 1 year anniversary. And I think the housing market is still crazy. There's no listings out there. It's the construction industry is being tested and strained to the max. You can't get supplies. So it's it's gone from, this great unknown and are we all going to get this to now we've got a new way to live.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. And I think that, in addition to a bigger house, which I think you're spot on, and everybody's saying, I need this kind of a space in my house now and this kind of a space. And I think that there's also these migration trends that are showing up, that are all related to the same thing. But if I'm going to be working in this house a little bit more, do I necessarily want to do it here versus maybe there?
Right, exactly.
And so you see some of those migration trends. And I think for where we're sitting right now here in Northern Virginia and in the capital region, that the driving force used to be how close can I get to DC, right?
Yes.
And living in this life of concentric circles that, the farther out I go, the longer it takes. The longer it takes, the more grueling the commute is, but I can get a better deal on my house. And so there's this trade-off. And I think that we're in a really interesting time is that all of a sudden there's this opportunity in these much further out concentric circles that there never was for the last 2 decades probably in this region. Right.
And I'll just bring up an interesting stat that Boomer Foster brought up, 15 episodes ago, and that is that pre-COVID, 5% of Americans worked and lived full-time from home. And post-COVID, it's going to be 25%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So even when we solve the disease and we get vaccinated, there's a lot of people that aren't going to go back to the old way. We have a new way of living now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that, we at Long and Foster, we're we're working with that. We used to discourage remote work
Right.
for our employees.
Yep.
And we had some skepticism about how efficient and productive you could be. Everybody learns, right?
Yeah.
And we learned a lot last year from our employees and what they were able to do. So we haven't figured out what tomorrow looks like in terms of our remote work policy, but just to give you a perspective, is I see a third of our employees working remotely. Back office and headquarters employees, I see a third of them working remotely at all times. Not the same
great.
third,
Right.
but just rotating.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine companies in any of the big metropolitan areas telling their people that you got to get back on the road twice a day.
Yeah.
And, you got to grind it out for an hour each way to get here. I think you'll lose employees, and I think there'd be a mutiny.
Yeah.
The thing that we do think is important is we do want to be together, we do want to be together, maybe not 100% of the time, but
Right.
we want to be together. And so we want to make sure that the time that people are working together is time that's used to really help develop each other and bond and things like that. And obviously, we're sitting in a great one of our offices here in McLean,
Right.
and it's a great office, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of fun here, and you guys are certainly very, very efficient and productive. But it's important for us in all of our offices, particularly here in the field, to get into the office. The Long and Foster culture is an important part of our of who we are, and COVID has taken its toll on that aspect of our business.
Absolutely. I agree. We talk about that in our team often, and we make great efforts to try to get together in very small groups occasionally, and it's important. Yeah. So looking back over the last year, what are you most proud of? Is there one decision that you looked at that you said, this made a really big difference in our success this year? And conversely, is there one decision you made that you wish you'd made differently?
I think that decision I referred to in the middle of March last year, which was well ahead of any of our competitors and well ahead of any of the states in terms of shutting down, locking down, sending our people home, and saying that, you're the most important, right? Our agents, our employees, and our customers are the most important people. We've got to protect their health, and the health of the business will come second, and we'll just see how that unfolds.
Right.
And look, we're in an innovative industry, and we certainly have a lot of innovative people here at Long and Foster, and all of our agents and our employees responded really, really well to that, and we were able to serve our customers who, isn't that an interesting thing? Is that one of the things, if you just will humor me for a second, on these lockdowns and the governors locking states down, one of the states, Pennsylvania, for example, locked down and said that real estate wasn't essential,
right?
And that's very different than, say, here in Virginia, where real estate was essential.
Yeah.
And in essence, what they said is, you can't conduct a real estate business. You can't show a house, you can't do anything, even if you take all kinds of precautions. Well, what about the thousands and thousands of people in the state of Pennsylvania and other states similar to that that were in the middle of a transaction? Maybe they sold their house and they needed to buy a new house. That it was just people in a position of authority didn't think about, you can lock down, but you can't lock down people's lives. You can't turn off their life. And there were thousands of people in the middle of a transaction that didn't have a choice. It wasn't just something fun to do to go out and look at a house. And so I was super proud of our realtors to be able to muster the innovation
and adapt,
and creativity, and adapt and solve those issues for those customers immediately. And then subsequently, we got to closing. We did not have one deal that didn't get to closing in 2020 because of COVID, because of that disruption itself. And our folks in the settlement services and title companies, we filled them up with masks and things like that, and all kinds of stuff. And we had outdoor settlements and all kinds of things, and we went totally virtual with our loan officers, and just everybody just found a way. And as you know, the business did really well in terms of production levels and things like that.
I think what maybe a lot of folks listening may not realize is that I think as real estate professionals, we deal with challenges every day. Every single transaction, every single one has a home inspection hurdle, has an appraisal hurdle, has a negotiation hurdle. So I think realtors in general are wired to overcome whatever challenge lands on your desk. So when COVID came along, I think it hit us all by surprise, obviously.
Sure. Who would have ever thought?
Who would have ever, right? You could have never predicted this.
It's only a movie.
Yeah, exactly, right. What was it?
Dustin Hoffman.
Outbreak. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, Outbreak.
Dustin Hoffman, right?
Yeah. So anything you would have done differently? Is there any one decision you look at and go, man, I really wish I had done this differently?
In 2020, this sounds ridiculous, and I'm sure there are, but major decisions, I think we made, there are no major decisions that I look back on and say that was a big mistake, should have done something different. There's smaller decisions that, sure, I would have done something different. I think that another day, I mentioned August 23rd. That was the worst day. That was worse than that March day, because that was the day, it was a Sunday, and that was the day that I was notified of this ransomware attack. At Long and Foster.
That's right.
And we had to make the decision on the phone, myself and Barry Redler, to shut down Long and Foster companies. And we did that, and boy, that was a lonely feeling. That was a lonely feeling, pit in the stomach feeling, and things like that. But probably the proudest thing, I think everybody did a great job with COVID and the way everybody pulled together and responded. But I thought it was extraordinary in our outage at Long and Foster companies. And fortunately, most of our non-real estate businesses, the non-brokerage businesses, were not impacted systems-wise. Those we were able to isolate, but the brokerage business certainly was. And we shut everything down, and it was like, oh my gosh, when are we ever going to be able to start things up? And I can't imagine this. And the brokerage team, Gary Scott and Boomer Foster and all the regional managers, and then all the branch managers, and my entire team was just extraordinary in terms of the way that they all stepped up. Nobody complained, and I think back on that, and nobody complained. Nobody pointed fingers. Nobody said it's so-and-so's fault. Everybody just kind of stepped up in a major way and did what they had to do. It was probably our finest hour at Long and Foster, and it'll never really be seen from the outside like I saw it from the inside.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, you did a great job.
Well, thanks. The team did a great job, and everybody. I was also thoroughly amazed with our realtor community. I thought we were going to get skewered with that, and the amount of support and the professionalism of our realtors was, just it was, gosh, it was kind of heartwarming. Just on a horrible day, and I say that in multiple days afterwards, felt so much better because everybody pulled together and was supportive.
Yeah. Well, the bad times make the good times all that much better,
without it. I mean, it's easy to be good in the good times.
It is.
It's the bad times that you have to look at. And you say that, John, and I know there's a lot of sayings, right, and cliches about that and adversity and things like that. But that was one of the things that I was sharing with my team. The outage was so much tougher for us than COVID because everybody was in the same proverbial boat with COVID. Every business, every competitor, but the outage was only us.
And at a time when the technology was most needed.
Well, isn't that the irony of the whole thing? We went from kind of this some technology and a lot of kind of personal relationships to all virtual, and then all of a sudden overnight we had to stop all virtual stuff and go back to everything manual, and it was like, you got to be kidding me. Like well, we're being tested. We're being tested. But it is. I had shared with the team all the time. It's like, you guys will look back and this you'll say, I was as good as I can be during that time, and I think they were.
Fantastic.
I look back at my career, and it would be times like this that were really tested me and actually made me grow and more. And that was, I had shared with my team, is that as horrible as this isn't the worst thing that's happened to me in my career. Right. So could be worse.
So we're not going to talk about that today. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to hear a little bit about what it was like to work with the legendary Wess Foster and some of your other items of value that you brought for us today.
Excellent.
We'll be right back. I'm John Jorgensen, and if you want to learn more about buying a home or selling your existing home, contact us through the show. We work with an incredible network of professionals who can help you get through the process smoothly. Again, that's gowithjohn.com. So we're back with Jeff Detwiler. Thanks again, Jeff, for coming in. I mean, I'm having such a great time.
Oh, it's awesome.
Listening to your
Thanks,
stories.
John.
Yeah, this is awesome. So I really think very highly of Wess Foster. You know, I remember in 2004, 5, 6, 7, when I was a new agent, Wess would routinely come in to the sales meetings here at the Long and Foster McLean office, and I know for a fact he went to all of his offices, or most of them, right? I guess I don't know for a fact if he went to all of them, but I've heard that he would routinely go into the offices, and he's a great guy, had great stories, would really enjoyed interacting with the agents, wanted to hear their stories, and their things they were happy about and things they were not happy about. But what was it like? And I've heard some stories from corporate, right? Yeah. But so what was your experience working with Wess? Tell us about Wess.
Well, gosh, could go on and on with that. You know, obviously, for those that don't know Wess, you know Wess very well, but Wess was an icon to our industry. And as I was new to the industry when I joined in late 2009 and 2010, and because of my role that I filled here at Long & Foster, I got exposure to a lot of these icons who really they built the industry in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, if you will, and created the foundation that we're all operating on now. But of that group, Wess was a leader amongst them, you know, always doing first. And boy, the stories I would hear from them about Wess and the things that he would do, and he was quite a person and extraordinary. You know, I do wish that in some ways, you know, if I were here a little earlier, you know, when he was at the very top of his game. Right. I think when I got here, you know, Wess was well into his 70s at that point in time, and he had already kind of set sights on taking his foot off the pedal a little bit and things like that. But so, you know, the first thing that comes to mind about Wess Foster is nobody can work a phone like Wess Foster.
Right.
He would pound out 100 phone calls a day. You know, he wouldn't come into the office every day, but the days that he came into the office, and he wasn't there at 8 or 9, and he wasn't there at 5, but he'd pound out 100 phone calls, and he would just call branch managers and agents and everybody, and he would have the 3-minute conversation, and he would build a list that was 4 pages long. long that day. And then our schedule was kind of the same thing, is that the days that he would come in, when he would first come in, the first thing I would do is go over and sit with him in his office.
Right.
And we would go through his list, and he would pull out 4 pages.
Yeah.
And we'd go through this whole list, and then I'd have to take all these things off the list and go do whatever Wes said that we were going to do. He committed to with his bigger than 51% voting share,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And,
Here you go, number one. Get this done.
Get this busy. How's it feel being number one?
Yeah.
So we would do that, but he was pretty funny in the sense that when you would talk to people who were on the other end of the phone, is Wes would call you up. He had that super baritone voice, you never doubted who it was on the phone, and he would ask a couple of really drilling questions, to get into whatever he wanted to talk about. But when he was done, he was done. He was like, you could be in the middle of the sentence, and if he was done, it was okay, good talking to you, bye. Boom. And like you're like, and he would just hang up. And I had many people tell me about that. But he was extraordinary in working things out on the phone. He was one of the things that we did when I got to know him the best is that he was a notorious driver when I got to know him. And what I mean by that is his new cars, like within about 90 days, he'd always start to customize them. For whatever reason, he liked to like push in this back quarter panel of his car, maybe the bumper. He liked it to have like a black mark across the front of it. It was interesting what he would do. Yeah. But so he would. We'd try to keep him off the road as much as possible. We felt that was doing our community service by keeping Wes off the road. So on occasion, we would go visit branches or we'd go to a big regional function. And so we'd get in the car and I'd drive him, and we'd have a 3-hour drive down to Hampton Roads or up to Philadelphia or whatever. And he would come in the car, and he'd get settled in, and he would get his list out, and his list would be pages and pages and pages. There would be rides where he would go through every single branch in our 200 branches or 175 branches at the time. What about this branch? What about that branch? And you would talk about all these things. But then, after about an hour and a half, he was done. Yeah. He put the list down, and for the next hour and a half, I could get Wes to talk about his days in high school, his days at VMI, going to college. He loved VMI.
So tell us a story that you.
Well,
think...
I'm not sure Betty knows these stories, so I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell those
got
stories.
You. Okay.
They were all innocent stories, but VMI was a military academy, and you're very disciplined in things you got to do, but those guys would go out and have a lot of fun and things like that. Yeah. And so when he would also talk about when he first got into the business, he lived out in California for a while. Like, you never think of Wess Foster living in California, but he lived out in California. And he would talk about he was dating some girl in the northern part of California, and he was stationed more central California. I might have my details wrong, but he would have to make this 120-mile jaunt, back to be ready for work the next morning, kind of a thing. I think he tested the limits of the California State Patrol. He was a fast driver at the time, and he would tell me a lot of those stories, and he would talk about stories about being stationed over in Germany. He was he was with a group over in Germany where he was stationed, and he just I bet you Wess Foster would have been a great friend. He was a fun-loving guy. I think really was one who embraced life, and obviously he built an extraordinary company or companies, did a great job, built a lot of great relationships. But so interesting is that I used to ask him, he obviously did very, very well for himself financially. He's a quintessential entrepreneur. If you ask him about kind of setting out to accomplish some of the things he accomplished, he would just say, I never set out to accomplish the things that I did.
Right.
He just took a day at a time, and he was always striving to do better, and he would always set shorter term goals and things like that. But all of this success and quite honestly, some of the wealth that surrounds him was not the thing for Wes. I think I don't know exactly how he lived, but I always got the impression that he was a pretty frugal guy and things like that, particularly compared to others that I would see, in his circle and things like that. And so just a great guy. And I used to tease him about, through his career and hearing some of his stories. And I would say, you're the guy in the casino that puts all your chips on red, and you just let it kept rolling and rolling and rolling, and you never took any chips off the table, and you had a huge mound of chips at the end of the night. And he was extraordinary in that function.
Yeah.
Can I tell you one story? A
Please.
Funny story. So when I first took the job, Wes was having a bout with headaches. He suffered from migraines, and particularly at the beginning when I got there. And I don't think I saw him for the first 60 days when I got to work, because he was just really under the weather and not feeling well. So he wasn't coming in. There was another guy that was here that was in late, left early. That was just his traffic pattern. He'd been with Wes forever from the beginning, George Eastman. Yeah. And then the guy that was the president of Long and Foster Companies before I was there, Dave Stevens, had been nominated to
president of Mortgage Bankers
Association.
FHA,
yeah,
right?
At the time.
That's right.
And so he was going through the confirmation style. So I think it had been like kind of 6 months since Dave was really here being serious. So the what comes to mind is the saying is when the cat's away, the mice will play.
Right.
So we had recently, about probably 2 years earlier, moved into the Long and Foster headquarters in Chantilly, which
George
you've
Carter
been at.
Way. Yep.
George Carter Way. Enormous building. Has an enormous parking garage connected to it, 1,300 parking spaces, because from what I understand is Long and Foster had to move 2 times prior into new buildings because ran out of parking spaces. And Wes said, I'm never going to run out of parking spaces again. So he got 1,300 parking spaces, and we were the only tenants in this 5-story building, something like 350,000 square feet. Enormous. You've seen it, but not everybody have seen it. But just an enormous, massive brick structure.
For the folks that drive up and down 28, it's the huge building that looks like a giant house. It's a commercial
big colonial
building.
looking
Exactly,
building.
Williamsburg Colonial.
I think it has the record for the most bricks in the state of Virginia or something like that.
Has to. It's insane.
So I start work there, and on the interior of it, there is this area of how the building was designed, an executive area. And so it was really only Wes, myself, and this other gentleman, George Eastman, that had offices in that executive area, and it was kind of cordoned off to everything else. Well, Wes wasn't coming in. George was coming in kind of late.
Yeah.
And every morning I would drive in early, new job, right? I'd get there at like 7, drive in. There wasn't a single car in that 1,300 slot parking structure.
Yeah.
I would walk into the building and up from the 2nd floor to the 4th floor, wouldn't see a soul. And the same thing, I'd leave. I'd stay there till maybe 7:30 at night, just pouring through kind of reports and books and things like that. Same thing, wouldn't see a soul, wouldn't see a single car in it. So I'm getting towards the end of the week, started on Monday. It's now Thursday, and I haven't seen but 2 people in the building. There were 2 people that would come down and just bring information to me and pile
food,
it.
right?
Yeah. No, I don't think there was any food. I don't think I was eating anything. And they would just pile stuff on my desk. And I called my wife on Thursday afternoon, and I said, you're going to think I'm crazy, Mary. Do you remember, John, the show Punked, Ashton Kutcher?
Yeah.
You know, where they play these like elaborate tricks?
Yeah.
I said to my wife, I think I'm on Punked. I think they rented out this big empty office building, and there's nobody here. And they hired me, and here's this guy Detwiler that's sitting in this office all alone, and he thinks he's running this big huge company with 10,000 agents and 1,000 or 2,000 employees, and there's nobody here.
Yeah, that's
nobody
hilarious.
here. So it wasn't until like the 10th business day that I actually saw somebody other than these two people, and I realized it's a little bit different now.
Yeah. Well, now it's back to empty again because of COVID,
it is back to
right?
empty.
So
it is back to empty. Yeah. So
everything old is new again.
That's right. It's just like bell bottoms. I'm still waiting for elephant bottoms to come back, right? Those jeans.
Right. Fantastic. Yeah. That's good stuff, Jeff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So tell us some of your lessons from the road. So you were gracious enough. I asked you if you could share a couple of business-related tidbits, which I ask everybody, right? If you're talking to folks out there that are running a company, what are some of the things that you think are important?
Yeah, so I thought about a couple of things, John, and these are real simple things, and I think that I've learned them in my position here, my role here, and throughout my career. But these are things that would serve us all well in life or in business, regardless of what your role is. The first one I would just say is good communications is so hard. I think it's underappreciated, the value of good communications versus kind of mediocre or bad communications.
I totally agree with that.
And I think it's overestimated how hard it really is to communicate.
Completely agree with you.
And just on that front is like, how hard could it be? You ask a question, I answer. It's like, how hard can that be? But that simple exchange between us can get all fouled up,
and does every day,
all the time,
all
the time. And when you start dealing on a larger and larger scale, if you start dealing instead of you and your friend, or maybe you and your spouse, start dealing with you and your family, it gets a little bit more complicated because there's more people, and it just gets exponentially more complicated. And I can't tell you how much time we commit to trying to be good communicators throughout Long and Foster, and it's hard. It's hard. But I think that as hard as it is, and as valuable as good communications is, as companies, we seldom ever try to develop our people or train them in how to be a good communicator.
Right.
I really was benefited one time earlier in my career where we spent an extraordinary amount of time with, we had a communications coach come in, and the executive team had access to the communications coach and had to learn about how to communicate and really more about like what goes wrong that we don't think about. If I say something, if I say the door is blue on the house, I think I know what I'm saying. You may take a door is blue on the house and interpret it as something different.
Absolutely.
And we kind of get off the rails there from the get-go. So that good communications is something that is really important. I think that,
let me jump in on that for a second. And I say this all the time because I want people to get value out of this podcast.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I preach is video, because I learned early on when you're doing a lot of communicating with a lot of people, when you're communicating with the public, that the public, and this is just my perspective, they're speaking, if they're calling you to interview you to be a realtor, they're also interviewing 2 or 3 other people usually. Right. If they're calling me to learn about building a house, they're usually talking to 2 or 3 other builders. And many times early on in my career, people would tell me that I told them something that I know for a fact I never said. Because if you ask me a question, there's an answer to the question. Yes. There's not 3 different answers to the same question.
Yes.
So putting things in video, I think, brought a lot of comfort to my customers, because not only could they hear me say it on the phone, I could say, hey, you know what, I've got this conversation recorded in video. Let me send it to you. So I do understand how hard that is, and within team members and training and all that, it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
Another thing, you and I briefly talked about it during the timeout or the break, was that in the context of communications, email and texts are dangerous. pick up the phone and call somebody, or go see them and call them. The number of times that people get off the rails and all bent out of shape because they misinterpret what somebody means or is saying in a text or a communication. And you've seen these chains, they go on and on and on, and they deteriorate into an argument.
Right.
I don't know who these people type a lot better than I do, because it would take me forever, to type out some of that. But it's just, be very careful about using texts and emails, because they're misinterpreted all the time by the receiver.
Right.
And you pick up the phone, and I think there's less lost in that.
Yeah. And I think our colleague Barry Redler has said to me many, many, many times that if you can't solve something in 3 volleys in an email, pick up the phone and speak like humans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, if it's not resolved, get on the phone. But you're absolutely right.
One of the reasons that I think, and I'm sure that you would agree, is that I think we all feel emboldened to some point on an email, where we lose some of our common decency and courtesy that we have when we speak to each other. I think we feel more accountable to each other when I'm sitting here talking to you.
Yes.
But we seem to lose some of that in a text or email. And you read some of these emails, are you serious? You really wrote that?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yeah.
So anyways, we just have to have some more discretion on those things.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So another thing that I think is interesting, and you were talking about, having a discussion with Nick here also, and just different points of view and things
Absolutely,
like that.
yeah.
And one of the things that I have really learned at Long and Foster, and it's come to serve me well from my family and from everywhere, is that, if you think about, let's say, conflict or disagreements or not agreeing, and the idea is that, there's not just one right answer. And the idea that depending on, the world looks different to people depending on where they sit and they're looking at it. So I think in a family, if you're a mother or a father, it looks way different than if you're a son or a daughter. Right? A brother or a sister. It looks way different. Not that it's anybody's wrong, nobody's right. It just looks different. And in business, I see that all the time. And I have conversations all the time with people that get so worked up about somebody has a difference of opinion of me or doesn't get what I'm saying. And I'm just saying, there's nothing wrong with that. The world looks different to them. And it should, because they see it from a different place than you see it. And I think that if we can just try to appreciate the person that's across from us or on the other end of the phone, and just appreciate why. You don't have to agree with it, but appreciate why they see it like it is, and maybe ask some questions.
Right. And I think it goes back to the 7 habits of highly effective people, which I brought up earlier. I think and my team, everybody working with me knows that we talk about email all the time, and I'll share a little something about that in a second. But seek first to understand and then be understood is habit 5 of the 7 habits of Stephen Covey's book. And probably the single most valuable tool that I have ever learned how to use in business, because if you're in sales or if you're providing a service, if you go in and just start talking and you just tell people what you're going to do, you may or may not be on the mark. I literally want to ask everybody, tell me what it is you need. What would you like to learn from me before I start talking? And that seeking to understand, there is no matter what side of any kind of a conversation you're on, when you take a moment to ask the other person, well, tell me what's your position and what before you start talking, it makes a big difference. It really is a great decompressor.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, and it's critical importance. Best tool in business is your ears.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We all could use them more.
Yeah.
And so talking about some other things, just conflict and things like that in business. It obviously it happens all the time. And I find myself as a mediator
Yes.
quite often. I mean, people will come to me with complaints or come to me with seeking that I change something. And I found that it's, there's two sides to every story.
Yes.
And it's not that anybody is necessarily not telling the truth, but I think we all remember things a little differently. You and I were just talking about that, right?
Yes.
We all remember things a little differently. Video helps us remember exactly how it was.
Exactly.
But we all interpret things a little bit differently, and there's always two sides to every story, and so we should never jump to conclusion when we hear one side of the story, and we should always, as you seek to understand. And I always say to my team is like, when we have an issue with someone, it's like, well, let's get the other side of this story, because there's always two sides, at least two sides, and quite often it's more than two sides, and the truth really exists someplace in the middle of all of those things. So
there's three sides at least to every story.
Well, quite often. So, and then the last thing I say, that this one is tongue in cheek, but we were talking about that, is that I share this with my team when somebody's coming in and talking about how ridiculous a particular employee is, and this, that, and the other thing, and can you imagine that, and the same thing with maybe a customer relationship issue. And I just said, well, you are right. Business would be a lot easier without any customers and without any employees, but we wouldn't have much to do around here.
No, we wouldn't. No,
if we didn't have that. So, customer relations and employee relations that's what we do every day. Is basically solve problems. When it works well, it works well.
Right.
It's about how well can you solve a problem.
Right. And if you have good policies and good procedures and people follow them, things are generally running more smoothly when they're not.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
Without a doubt. Yeah, that's good.
Jeff Detwiler, thank you. I'm humbled that you came in today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and
thanks, John. I appreciate the invitation. I just wanted to tell you, it's so awesome that you put me so high on the priority list, just number 16. Yeah. There's 100 people waiting outside.
Well, the truth of the matter is we actually tried. We called over to corporate to get you on the show, and they said, Jeff's really busy, but we got this guy Boomer. We can send him over if you want. And I said, okay, we can do that.
Well, it has been a lot of fun. I tease you, but it is harder getting on your show than it is getting a vaccine these
That's
days.
true.
Yeah, right?
That's true.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Congratulations on everything that you're up to.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right, Jeff Detwiler, thanks for coming in. Had a great time talking to you. I know you're going to be back on the show here in the next few weeks when we can talk more about the direction of the company and where you want to take it. I'm looking forward to that conversation. If you guys want to learn more about Jeff Detwiler and the Long and Foster companies, you can find a link to his profile at the episode page at Go With John. You go to gowithjohn.com and go to Jeff Detwiler's episode page, and we will link to his profile over at Long and Foster. Until next time, this is John Jorgensen. Go build something extraordinary.